Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to call up the Student Non-Discrimination Act amendment. It does not have an amendment number because, well, I'm going to withdraw it. But I will note that my remarks are a little longer than the 5 minutes, so I'll ask your indulgence. But I am withdrawing the amendment, though I and many members of this committee feel very, very strongly about it. Justin Auberg was a sophomore in high school in my home state of Minnesota. Justin played the cello. In fact, he wrote music for the cello. His mother told people that he was a sweet boy who seemed to always have a smile on his face. Justin told his mother that he was gay when he was 13. Then on July 9th, 2010, Justin hung himself in his bedroom. His mother would go on to learn from Justin's friends and from messages he left before his death that he was the victim of incessant anti-gay bullying. Justin was 15 years old. Seth Walsh was a young boy who attended school in California. Starting in the 5th grade, Seth's classmates started to taunt him and call him gay. The harassment got worse as he got older. It got so bad that he was afraid to walk home from school or use the boys' restroom or change in the boys' locker room. His mother complained to his school repeatedly, but her pleas fell on deaf ears. On September 19, 2010, Seth hung himself from a tree in his family's backyard. He passed away 9 days later. He was 13. Carl Walker Hoover was a Boy Scout and a football player for his school in Massachusetts. Carl loved his schoolwork and played the wise man in his church's Christmas play. Starting in the 6th grade, the kids at Carl's school started bullying him and call him gay, even though he didn't identify himself as gay. Carl's mother got involved and repeatedly asked the school to intervene. On April 5th, 2009, Carl's mother found him hanging by an extension cord on the 2nd floor of her home. She was getting ready to leave her house yet again to ask Carl's school to stop the bullying. Carl's mother would later tell the press, and I quote, "I've been homeless, but Carl and I made it through. I was a victim of domestic violence, and we made it through. The one thing we couldn't get through was public school." Carl was 11 years old.
Jesus.
Justin, Seth's, and Carl's stories are not anomalies. No, they are just recent victims in an epidemic of school bullying against children who identify as or are thought of or thought to be gay, lesbian, bisexual, or transgender. 9 out of 10 LGBT kids are harassed or bullied in school. 1/3 report having skipped school in the last month because they felt unsafe. And study after study has shown that LGBT students are far more likely than their peers to attempt suicide. But the sad fact is that our federal laws are failing kids like Justin, Seth, and Carl. Because our federal laws say that you cannot discriminate against a child on the basis of race, sex, religion, disability, or national origin, but they do not explicitly prohibit discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation or gender identity. In 1963, when John F. Kennedy addressed the nation to call for a civil rights law, he explained that black children were suffering from vicious discrimination, and he explained that this was a wrong for which, quote, "there are no remedies at law." In 1972, when Congress passed Title IX, it did so because women and girls were suffering pervasive discrimination in schools and were being systematically denied academic opportunities freely offered to men, and because women had no legal way to stop it. Well, yet again, we are faced with a group of students that is facing pervasive, systemic discrimination. They are being viciously harassed and bullied. They are staying home from school. They're dropping out of school. They are literally killing themselves. And our schools aren't doing enough to stop it. And yet again, these students have nothing they can do about it. There is no law that prohibits discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation in schools. There are no remedies at law. My amendment, the Student Non-Discrimination Act, would fix this. My amendment would prohibit discrimination and harassment in public schools based on sexual orientation, or gender identity. It would make sure that schools take proactive steps to protect kids like Justin and Seth and Carl. It would make sure that when parents call a school to complain, when they call that school to say, my child isn't safe, then that school will listen. And my amendment would allow the Department of Education and the Department of Justice to get involved when those schools aren't doing enough. Our children deserve the right to feel safe at school. My amendment would help make that right a reality for LGBT students across the country. This amendment is the right thing to do. It follows a long precedent of Congress stepping in to protect the most vulnerable members of American society when they face pervasive discrimination. And by that measure, this amendment is absolutely necessary. That's why more than a third of the members of the United States Senate have endorsed the bill that this amendment is based upon as co-sponsors, including every Democratic member of this committee. But, Mr. Chairman, my understanding is that some members of the committee think that if we considered it in markup today, that the whole NCLB reform would lose bipartisan support. And I'd like to make clear to everyone watching that it is my strong belief that if it did come up for a vote, it would not only win, but it would win with bipartisan support. But I've heard from too many parents, too many teachers across Minnesota that we desperately need to overhaul No Child Left Behind. So I simply cannot tank the whole bill at this time. But I appreciate Chairman Harkin's recommendation that I offer this as an amendment when the bill before us gets to the Senate floor. So, Mr. Chairman, I want to thank you for agreeing to work with me to try to get a vote on this amendment when we get to the floor. And I also want to thank Senator Kirk. And I didn't mean to speak up about your last amendment. It was the last thing I wanted to do, believe me. But I really do want to thank you, Senator. The Senator has agreed to work with me to find compromise language that he can support as a co-sponsor before we bring this vote to the floor. And I look forward to working with you on that, Senator. So before I finish, let me state clearly that I will oppose any unanimous consent request to consider other amendments and not this one. It's just too important to Tammy Auberg, Wendy Walsh, and Serdinier Walker, and to all the kids who are too scared to go to school and who are suffering so profoundly that they are considering suicide. So for now, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to withdraw this amendment, but I believe we need to pass it. We need to vote on it. Kids who are scared and have nowhere else to turn need our help to keep them safe when they are in our care. So thank you. And I thank you all for your indulgence.